Not right now, I don't. Possibly. Looks like right. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Yes, yes.
Okay, everybody, welcome. It is 4:30 and we will go ahead and get this meeting started. I'd like to first and foremost welcome you all to board policy today in the Toronto County School District. I'm incredibly grateful to see the amount of members from the community who have come, and I am extremely grateful to all the trustees who have shown up today. We are going to go ahead and do a review of our February 27, 2023 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look over those? If I have no objections, we will go ahead and approve those minutes from February 27. Okay. We don't need to move it. But if I don't have any objections, I did the same thing one time. So if I hear no objections to the minutes, we will go ahead and approve those minutes. Those minutes are approved. We are going to go ahead and start with talking about board policy 6211, home-based school participation in district-sponsored athletics and activities. I will pass this over to Superintendent Jennings.
Trustees, you have before you the 6211 board policy, home-based school participation in district-sponsored athletic and activities programs. So as you read through there, it identifies that grades 5th through 12th grade. And actually, there's been a lot of work over the last few years, and actually it's kindergarten through 12th grade. So if trustees, if the committee would be willing to have us bring forward a draft, we can do that, if that's your will, or trustees can work on a draft on their own. What is your preference?
I think having you guys bring forward this draft at this time would be great. When you take a look at it, when you have it ready.
Chair, Alvy, and committee members, I'm going to ask Mr. Wilcox to come to the microphone and hand out a draft policy. We will not spend a lot of time on it. It's one just informing you, and there'll be some subsequent.
There's no action tonight, correct?
No, just subsequent policy meetings, and then going to the board as a whole.
Okay, perfect. Trustee Schmidt, did you have something?
Yes, I did. As far as this, including kindergarten, because our homeschool's activity level is judged by or it's administered by the Wyoming High School Athletic Association, they don't have any jurisdiction over K through 5th grade. They only do it middle school and high school, so we don't really need to include them in that policy. And I'd be more than happy to help write it, but it's just activities, the state statute says we're open, all activities are free, so I don't think it needs much other than just updating and tweaking, but not to add K through 5th.
Okay, thank you. I will turn it over to, yes, Mr. Wilcox. And I guess going along with what Trustee Schmidt said, by not adding in, what'll happen by adding in doesn't really do anything.
Chairman Alvey, Trustee Schmidt, and other trustees, just as a reference, your current policy that you have does include, and you have a copy of that, the Wyoming High School Activity Association and the Natrona County School District. So it is a combined statement under current policy. Our practice on why we were advocating K through 5 be added, basically, or K through 4. We had 5th through 12th grade previously, is that we do have that currently happening within our processes for clubs and activities specifically. They would not be Wyoming High School sanctioned, but currently the proposed adjustment would allow the Natrona County School District will provide students kindergarten through 12th grade with the opportunity to participate in district-sponsored school-based athletics and or activity and or organized club programs in accordance with policies and regulations of both Wyoming High School Activity Association and the Natrona County School District. Again, that has been standing since much earlier, about a decade ago. It was last adopted and applied. It would just align that language for not just Wyoming High School Association at the upper grades or the high school level, but also for Natrona County School District activities and clubs.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I do look forward to being able to discuss this more at a later date for our next policy meeting. Okay, we'll go ahead and go on. We do have our proposed policy. This is going to be for information and mostly discussion. Proposed board policy 2120, which is the district's position. I know this has been brought forward by Trustee Schmidt, so at this time I will turn it over to her to please read the policy that you have written and then give us a little bit of your reasoning as to why you feel this is necessary.
Chairman Albert.
Trustee Hopkins?
Yes. Yes, will we be receiving the additional information?
I want a hard copy because it is uploaded right now in Board Docs.
Yeah. Can I get a hard copy?
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, the additional, you know what I'm talking about, the,
Oh, the information that she had emailed separately, I'm sure we could print it off, I don't know, but do you? That was something that she set on the side.
I guess I assume that it would be present here.
Yeah, not on the actual agenda, no, but I'm sure. I have my copy I printed for the meeting, but it wasn't gonna be loaded onto here, cause it was more, like her definitions as to why and stuff.
Well, it's also research.
Oh yeah, her research, was that the 40-page one?
That was the medical
Okay.
research.
So that was the medical research.
The reasoning with the, links to the stories. I've also got a few more, today that I can.
Okay, Superintendent Jennings.
Chair Alvey, Trustee Hopkins, we do have copies that were emailed to trustees. I can ask staff to come up and see if they can make hard copies of that, and we'll get that distributed.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and proceed though while those copies are being made, if you don't mind, Trustee Schmidt.
Okay. Board policy reads as states, and this is a draft policy that is the first time it's being read to the committee and to the other board of trustees. So it's something of a work in progress. Natrona County School District recognizes individual human development that children will go through from kindergarten through 12th grade. We acknowledge that the puberty phase can result in a period of identity crisis due to physical and mental changes as well as societal pressures. During this delicate physical and mental development, it is our desire to allow each child the opportunity to progress at their own individual pace. In support of this development, we will abide by the current Wyoming State Birth Certificate information. Natrona County School District will honor the stated sex, biological sex, on an official Wyoming State Birth Certificate or official state-issued birth certificate. This policy is designed to create a clear and distinct direction as to the delicate and changing social norms regarding identity crisis and gender dysphoria. The term identity crisis encompasses all alternatives, identities such as furries and non-binary. Gender dysphoria will be used instead of transgender because the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, a manual published by the American Psychiatric Association as the diagnosis of transgender. Due to the lack of FDA approval of medications, surgical treatments for minors, and minimal scientific studies on the standard of care, we cannot allow students of opposite biological sex to coexist in bathrooms, locker rooms, overnight stays, and athletic events. Section 1 are definitions of terms. Sex is a sex chromosome and a type of chromosome involved in sex determination. Humans and most other animals have 2 sex chromosomes, X and Y. That in combination determine the sex of an individual. Females have 2 X chromosomes in their cells, while males have X and 1 Y. Sex, 1.2 is sex defined by the Wyoming Vital Statistics, is the physical genitalia characteristics found at birth. 1.3, puberty. Puberty is the process of physical maturation where an adolescent reaches sexual maturity and becomes capable of reproduction. On average, puberty typically begins between 8 and 13 in females and 9 and 14 in males. Puberty is associated with emotional and hormonal changes as well as physical changes such as breast development in females, the large A, pubic hair development, pubarche, genital changes in males, voice changes, an increase in height, and the onset of menstruation, menarche. Puberty proceeds through 5 stages, termed Tanner stages, ranging from pubertal to full maturity. 1.4, identity crisis, happens during the 5th stage of Erickson's stages of development. During the crisis, a person experiments with different roles and identities. At the end of this stage of development, a person either resolves the crisis and has a firm identity or has identity confusion. In Erickson's theory, an identity crisis is a normal, predictable part of health development. 1.5 is pronouns. Pronouns are any of a small set of words such as I, she, he, you, it, we, or they, in a language that are used as substitute for nouns or noun phrases and whose reference are named or understood in the context. Section 2 is school facilities. 2.1, all students will be required to use the restroom and/or locker room that corresponds to the biological sex on their state-issued birth certificate. Exceptions will be made for those students who require handicap accessibility that is not available to them in the regular restroom or locker rooms. 2.2, if a student has a need or desire for increased privacy in the locker room, the student may use a stall in the corresponding bathroom, locker room of their biological sex. Section 3, school activities. 3.1, regardless of ever having undergone or presently undergoing any kind of treatment for gender dysphoria, including but not limited to puberty blockers and sex-affirming hormones, all students and athletes shall have the opportunity to participate in all athletic activities offered to their biological sex listed on their state-issued birth certificate. Section 4, school trips. 4.1, in cases of overnight trips sponsored by the district, all students must room according to their biological sex listed on their state-issued birth certificate. A student shall not be required to participate in any district-sponsored trip if they feel uncomfortable for the room assignments. Parents and students shall be made aware of room assignments no less than 3 days prior to the trip. If the student has a documented medical or mental issue that would prohibit them from rooming with the other students, every effort shall be made to accommodate that student's needs. Parents must notify the school or coach and/or director prior to the first overnight trip. Section 5, confidentiality. Schools and employees should listen when a student voluntarily discusses their gender dysphoria or sexual identity. The school employee should encourage the student to talk with their parents. The employee should notify the parent or guardian of the student about the conversation, and an incident report must be filed with the school office. If there is prior Department of Family Services recording of abuse, alternative notification can occur. 5.2, parents and guardian or social work must be contacted within 24 hours of the student declaration of their gender dysphoria, status, and/or sexual identity. If the parents wish to receive resources regarding these issues, the school can refer them to outside community resources. Section 6, liability. Natrona County School District will not provide liability protection to any teacher, administrator, counselor, or any other staff member who takes it upon themselves to counsel, advise, or encourage the behavior of a student expressing gender dysphoria. The district does not provide training in this area and cannot promote or protect any staff member that chooses to take it upon themselves to aid a student in this area. The dress code. All students are expected to uphold the district dress code policy found in the student handbook. Only students with documented physical disabilities will be allowed to receive accommodation according to the dress code. Section 8, school dances. The district shall not impose different or unique practices or rules for same-sex couples who attend and or participate in school activities, including dances. This includes such matters as prohibition of attendance of same-sex student couples, limitations of public displays of affection only applicable to same-sex couples, discounted couples tickets, dance court titles will correspond to the sex defined on the individual state-issued birth certificate. And finally, the change of official school records. District records require by law to include the student's legal name and or sex will be changed by the district upon the student or former student's presentation of appropriate legal documentation to the district office.
Yeah, that's what I said.
The reason behind this policy, and I will read the statement that I have, but I have also included to all the board members a lengthy medical research on the care that is recommended, the standards of care that are recommended by the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, how that changed, and I've got the care from the Dutch studies, the surgery, the hormone treatments, all of that. And this research has come from PubMed.gov, which is an NIH website, and Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine. This is available Anybody can research it, but I gave it to all of you as, to substantiate the reason why we need this. I also have another article that came to me over the weekend, from the American College of Cardiology that says hormone therapy for gender dysphoria may raise cardiovascular risks and that they need to be screened for it. So that's another medical one that I have. Another reason for it that came across over the weekend, unfortunately there's some articles that I came across. One being a school in Wisconsin that had an incident with a transgender girl in the locker room with 3 other girls exposing themselves. And this lawsuit is occurring to the high school because the school did not have a policy. The district and the school did not have a transgender policy, and the parents weren't informed, and so the school's now being sued. One closer to home is the Sweetwater case that was announced on Friday that the school district in Sweetwater is being sued because of hiding and teachers and staff pushing and encouraging their daughter, this couple's daughter. So there is lawsuits. We also have the added confusion of our state superintendent who came out against the Title IX transgender recommendations coming from the Biden administration. I have her statement as well that I can share with all of you afterwards. Those are ones that I got over the weekend. So those are reasons, some of the reasons, the confusions that we have all around us. We also have the state of Colorado, the governor, who has issued and signed off on allowing anybody, any child, whether they have parent consent or parent involvement, to come down there and start these therapies and start surgeries. So this is all a concern that has led up to this. And now I'll read my statement that I added with policy. The third policy that we discussed briefly but extremely important is the issue of transgenderism and how we as a school district should address the issue. I understand that this subject matter can upset many people if we disagree with the perception that activists put before us. This is not an issue that has anything to do with sexual orientation. By nature, it is the mental struggle that a small minority deal with in regards to their physical being. Prior to 2015, all the scientific research supported the notion that a small young population was afflicted by body dysphoria, that if left alone would grow out of the disorder. After 2015, when many LGBTQ activists decided to expand their reach regarding sexual orientation, they adopted the trans community that wished to be cosmetically the opposite gender. Unfortunately, for the self-exploitation of this activism, many of the adult trans community were struggling with physical abuse, mental abuse, a feeling of not belonging, a feeling of not being loved and respected. Their solution for this struggle was to change who they are cosmetically. This free-flowing of sharing their struggles and their individual choices on social media has reached an incredible amount of young developing children that may be struggling with some of these same issues. Because our children are growing up in a society that instant gratification and the medication for any and every affliction is advertised on every electronic platform they come across. It becomes a subliminal message that they too can change all the ills by simply taking a pill, having a surgery, changing their names and clothes. If their world does not support them, then the world is wrong, and they should fight to change society to fit their viewpoint. This notion can be a dangerous one for children. One, it is based on emotional context that is often in the eye of the beholder. Two, it is not realistic to make society fit your viewpoint instead of you becoming confident and educated in your own viewpoint. Most importantly, children are not being taught that their problems with insecurity can be for many different reasons. Defining and dealing with those reasons is the best way to heal. As adults, we know that pubescent times can be a very difficult time for children. It is the final mental and physical growth that a person goes through before they are considered adults. We have put several limits, laws, or restrictions on children for this reason. Prohibition of alcohol, smoking, marriage, voting, financial responsibility, and many more. If we are to assume a role in this mental issue by affirming the disorder, subsequently condoning the improper use of grammar, the acknowledgement of a child choosing to be recognized as a different gender, then we should and will be responsible as a district in time when we are found to be wrong in our approach. If in time we are found to be wrong in our approach. We do not employ mental health experts or consult medical experts regarding our policy or administration regulations on this issue. We do not have medical studies that defend or support our practices. We have not researched the standard of care that is being pushed by the Medical Psychological Association on this issue. If we are not careful with how we write the policy and in admin regulations, then we can be opening ourselves up for the future lawsuits. In 10 years, when the children in this district have reached full maturity, and realize that they now have medical issues because they took prescriptions that were not FDA approved, or had therapy from therapists that were not trained in the trans issues, or were encouraged to explore their trans identity by principals, nurses, teachers, etc., then we can and probably will be sued by an attorney who knows that he will get a big payday from public schools. So I've attached these articles, I've attached the research. I hope that you guys have had time to look at it. It's quite extensive. But these are my reasons why I think we need to have a direction. We all received, or I think most of us received, an email from a gentleman who said that we have schools that do have agreements for pronoun usage. But we didn't have a policy on this. We don't have a consensus of what we're doing in the district. And that gives us a lot of holes if we are not being all-inclusive, and that we don't give each and every school the same direction instead of letting them piece it together on their own.
Thank you, Trustee Schmidt, for all of that. As a committee and other board members, is there anybody that would like to say anything? I can go ahead and start. I do find a lot of holes in this, and I do find it incredibly difficult to create a policy. This almost kind of seems we're creating a policy for a problem that we don't have at this time. It's difficult, I think, sometimes as a board member to think about our place or what we're trying to do. We're here for the betterment of students, and ultimately, when you think about a parent dealing with their student and the staff, I'm wondering as to why it might be our position to put ourselves in between that and say that we think we know better than those parents, those students, and the staff. Trustee Sidelli.
Thank you, Chair Aldi. May I ask Mr. Silva a few questions?
Absolutely.
Mr. Silva, I recall at our last policy meeting, I asked you if we were bound by the provisions of Title IX. As I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, your answer was yes at that time. Here's an easy one, I think. If there is a disagreement, shall we say, between a federal program such as Title IX and state law or a school district, which one takes precedence?
No. Trustee Sidelli, none of these issues are easy, okay? They're a challenge. They're a challenge for the federal government, they're a challenge for the state legislators, they're a challenge for school districts, they're a challenge for the courts, and a lot of these issues are making their way through the courts. So we don't know really what all of this is gonna look like 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now. We don't know. We're really on the cusp of a civil rights movement, similar to what happened with the education civil rights movement that we saw in the 60s, but we don't know what it's going to look like. And we're really kind of growing as a nation and as a people here, and so we don't know. So to answer your question, of course the federal law trumps the state law.
No.
So, I mean, that's an easy one. It's just more challenging and difficult to figure out the right course right now.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that some circumstances are working their way through the courts, as we might well expect in our particular society. If, and this is a hypothetical, I guess, or maybe it's an easy one, if a school district were to adopt a policy that violates Title IX, is it likely that that district would leave itself open to some sort of a lawsuit?
Right, so let's take the bathroom issue, for example. All right, so there's currently a split in the circuits as it relates to bathrooms, a split between the 4th and the 11th Circuit. And so the 4th Circuit is up on the eastern side, West Virginia, Maryland, DC, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Now in those circuits, there's a case that could have went to the Supreme Court. They tried to get it to the Supreme Court. but it didn't make it. They didn't grant certiorari. But there's a case that, in that case, they held that you could use the bathroom that you identify with. So in that case, the complainant was an individual by the name of Gavin Grime, born female, transitioning to male, and was allowed to use male bathrooms. Okay, and that's the rule out of that case. Then the Fourth Circuit case, which is out of Florida and involves the states of Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, had the exact opposite rule. The individual in that case was an individual by the name of Drew Adams. And so in Florida, they said, no, you can't use that. You have to use your birth certificate, your biological birth gender, okay? So there's not a clear delineation there. And so that's an example of things working its way through the court system. Ultimately, the United States Supreme Court will have to make the decision on that. It will do that. The Supreme Court usually does that when a lot of the circuits end up split and we have a split of the rule. It's not a surprise that the United States Supreme Court didn't take up that Fourth Circuit case because it wants to see what the other circuits are going to do. Currently, we don't have a 10th Circuit case on that, but there would be exposure in some of the rules. Historically, what I've seen this district do, and we've dealt with these issues, is we embrace the parents, we embrace the student, and we work on a level of cooperation. Like the first time that I participated in the process, I was dumbfounded as how well the school district worked on these issues in a way that brought time to try to alleviate the anxiety between the parents, the student, and the district. It was just an amazing process. Tom Ernst did it, and I was really impressed by how that worked. So that's kind of how we do it in this district, but to answer your question, yes, there's exposure. But we can be exposed on a lot of levels to lawsuits. They come in all sorts of directions, and if you saw the Casper Star Tribune, we got one here on Friday, so.
Thank you.
Yes, Trustee Christopherson.
Even though I'm not a member of this committee, I would like a chance to weigh in. I do have to say that, in general, I agree with Trustee Smith. I don't think that we should have males competing on female teams. As a matter of safety, I don't think we should have cross locker rooms. And over the past 9 years, this isn't just a new subject. I mean, it's really risen to the top, but I've been involved in a lot of those decisions, and they take it on an individual case, and so far they've been able to come to a conclusion, that's acceptable to both sides. This type of a policy, it's way overbroad, and it would be impossible for us to make it through this. I mean, just take one example on the bathroom issues. They mentioned it in the opening that you don't coexist in bathrooms, and how that's dealt with in this policy is that all students will be required to use a restroom and locker room that corresponds to their biological sex on their state issued birth certificate. Well, that doesn't work because, we have to take into account that there's a kid in here that's pretty confused, right? And if we make that kid go into the wrong bathroom, they could be abused, beat up, or whatever. So we have to take into account their feelings and what's happening to them. So how we've handled it in the past is the school gets together and finds out a bathroom that one kid can use, right? And they have a policy that says that they have to go into the bathroom that's on their sex. And this is riddled with that. That's just one example. There's hundreds of examples of things that we could argue and go through. There's actually probably 20 different policies in this one policy. And if we want to, go to work on a policy that boys can't compete on girls' teams, well, we have, that's going to take a lot of cracking just for that one, because you can't just say that you have to compete on the team through your own sex, because there's girls that's good enough to compete on the football team, and I want to let them get that opportunity, right? So, every one of these things is so deep and so complicated that, this instrument that's been brought before us today, it's more not a policy, it's more of a manifesto. And I don't think it's workable in this committee, even though I'm not in this committee. If this came before the general board, I would vote it down just on the fact that it is way too broad, way too big, way too broad.
I agree, thank you so much.
Trustee Alby, right now I do not think we have a need for this policy. We have processes in place, just like Trustee Christopherson has said, to deal with those students that are facing these trying times. And so we handle those, as he said, on a individual basis. And I would not, if this committee would recommend this to the board, when it went to the full board, I would not support it.
Thank you so much, Trustee Walsh. Oh, Trustee Howie?
So I read a lot and did a lot of thinking about this and did a little research myself, and just came up with a few thoughts. First of all, I think this whole thing got going again because one person came worried about furries using litter boxes in schools, and when they talked to her, there was no such thing anywhere. She couldn't even tell us the school where she had been told it was, or even exactly who told her. So that's one thing. As Trustee Christopherson said, we already have a restroom solution in place, and as far as I know, we've had 0 complaints. The High School Activities Association has its own policy. It's been used, I checked, it's been used a total of 4 times in the last 5 years. With roughly 90,000 students in the state, I realize not all of them are athletes, but they're in all different activities. 4 is a pretty low number, and there has also not been one complaint about how things were handled. I think it's just a complicated issue. Something more complicated than even we can make a policy for. And I guess my question to you, Trustee Schmidt, is what are you trying to accomplish with this policy?
What I'm trying to accomplish is that, for one, it's a draft policy. It was, when we met last month, we talked about, is there a need for this? Some expressed there was, some expressed there wasn't. And so that's why I offered to go ahead and give it a staff of drafting the policy. So it isn't a set policy. It's not a perfect policy. I never intended it to be. It's something that we can work with. It's a starting point. My intent is to give direction. We are all elected officials here. We should be the ones that are taking cover. This is a social issue. This is a community norms issue. And it should be addressed by an elected official. And I think it's only fair to give the district schools and principals cover. They can be part of the policy-making decision as well. I would love parents to be involved in this. This is to give that control, to make sure that all that control is in the parents' hands. That they're the ones that are being notified, because yes, children will talk to teachers and other counselors and that type of people in school. But the parents need to know that their child is expressing this. So that is my main intent, is to make sure parents are being kept in the loop, that we don't have staff going out and pushing children in a certain way, or direction that's against what that family wants, or wishes. So these are all things and tenets that I want to include, that I want to make sure we have encompassed. But again, this is a draft. This is something that I would like to have conversations about. It's not something that I expect anybody to vote on for quite some time. It is a complicated issue. I mean, just looking at the medical side of it, it's extremely complicated. And it's something that we all need to research, and we all need to sit down with. We need to hold a lot of different community sessions and do that. But most importantly, I think it is our job to establish the policy and establish the rules, so that if there is a difficulty, if there is a problem, it comes back onto us. And no principal, no teacher, no counselor, nobody in the school should have to take the brunt for having to make all these decisions that are very difficult and very heavy. It's just not fair to them.
And so I think it's our job. We're the ones that signed up for this. We're the ones that ran. We're the ones that took this position. So we're the ones that should sit down and work this through, include parents, open it up to the public, announce to the public we're having a discussion. We want to get your input. Send out emails to parents at all school levels. Send out emails because yes, the children need to be protected that are having these issues. But so do the children that are not having these issues that may be exposed to this and have confusion. So we need to make sure we're meeting everybody's side on this. So that's my intent, is that this is the jump start. This is just the start of it. I know a lot of people say, oh, this can't happen. I know Trustee Christopherson says it needs a lot of work. I totally agree with you. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a policy worker, so I'm working on it. I threw it out there. And so I hope we can all sit down and have a lot of working sessions on this, because it is an issue that is not going away, that is in this state, that is in this district. And we should definitely address it and have some type of framework. We already have conflicting law. The U.S. House of Representatives just passed the protection of women in women's sports. Our legislature did it. They had a multitude of bills that came through, whether these surgeries are legal or not. There's no legal direction out there. From the federal level, we have a president and a Department of Education that are saying we're making these changes to Title IX, but they really don't have constitutionality to do it because it's an existing law. So there's a lot of conflict out there. And we can sit here and just say, well, we'll wait until everybody else figures it out, or we can try to take a lead, and if we do get sued, we get sued. And we fight it from that, because we could get sued for anything at this point.
If I may. Trustee Schmidt, I just want to, you made some great points, and it does look like you worked on this a lot. When you referred to the state law, you were talking about the student eligibility and scholastic activities, right? State statute goes into effect July 1, 2023 as it relates to sports.
Okay. What I just want to mention is that when I say this is a far more complicated issue than we could ever make a policy for, I have some personal family experience with this. And so far, the family has dealt with it with the help of the schools. And I have not seen any problems with it so far. I also know it's not, this state is not giving minors medicines. They aren't doing surgeries. So, and I really don't see that happening. My relative in question is 19 now, and she's still confused. What I really don't want to see is for her to stand out. I mean, she deserves an education as much as anybody else. She's never made a problem for anybody else. And I don't think it's right that we make a policy against certain students, and that's what I feel like we're doing.
Thank you, Trustee Howie, Trustee Hopkins, and then Trustee Christopherson.
Thank you for sharing, Trustee Young. Thank you, Mary, for this attempt. I appreciate it. With the, in response to Howie saying that we're not doing surgeries here yet, we're not doing the medications. Wellspring just opened up on 2nd Street, and they will be offering the medications and surgery, and possibly, I mean,
yes, they will.
We have to, well, it's always starts somewhere.
Yeah.
So, you know, I agree with Trustee Smith that we can't hide. It's gonna keep coming. You know, with this, about every subject we've seen, it keeps growing, it keeps pushing, and I prefer to keep this discussion open and to tackle this, and I believe that we do need to make a policy about this, and ask for everyone's input on this. It's a community subject, so I hope that the committee does vote to continue the discussion. Thank you.
I just like to say a little thing about the trustee Schmidt put out there a couple cases. One of them in Wyoming. I read that media story about what's happening down in Rock Springs. And having sat on the school board for many years and run a company of my own, I've come to the conclusion that there's always two sides to every story. And after I read that story, I said, yeah, they got one side out there pretty well. So if you're really interested in hear the other side of that story, right? We can't sit here as a board and make decisions and policy based on a media story down in Rock Springs or a furry story out of California or whatever the latest wave is hitting the internet. We just can't do it, right? We have to run this school district in a way that's fair to everybody. And we have been doing that. I've been involved in cases with bathrooms. I've been involved in cases with locker rooms, overnight stays where they wanted us. These are all resolved to the benefit and satisfaction of both sides. This school district does a good job of it. Trying to sit down and be the spear in this fight that's coming is not something we should do. I mean, we are here to protect our kids. We're not here to set social standards and fight the good fight, because I mean, I'm the same way. I look at what's going on in this world and I worry about our world. There's a bunch of evil out there, you know, and there's a bunch of people trying to make our kids do evil things, you know, and I'm there. I mean, if you have individual things that you want to address and they're individual and a sharp blade and we go in there with the scalpel, but we can't take a sledgehammer and expect to come out with anything but a mess. So that's one of that.
Thank you so much, Trustee Christopherson. Trustee Snelly.
Trustee Schmidt, I was considering a question for you, and then I thought I might try to answer it. Okay. After listening to everything, I was going to say, can you take all of that and put it into one sentence? So I tried, and I'd like you to listen to what I wrote and tell me if this is close to what you might say if you were to put it in one sentence. That, as Trustee Howie asked, what do you hope to accomplish? So tell me if this sounds good. My purpose is to keep the board aware of the magnitude of the situation and, after appropriate discussion and work sessions, consider whether or not we want to develop a policy in the future and what that policy might contain. Does that come close?
I think it's a start, but I would say it's 100%.
Okay. So we could add to that sentence if we wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for that wonderful discussion. Oh, Trustee Schmidt, one more thing?
I just have one thing. We talk about the safety and the health of the children, and I agree. This is one of the reasons for driving it. And if you look at this medical packet, and it's quite extensive, and this is from our federal health agencies, and you go back to the surgeries and the therapies and the risks of the hormone therapies and all the adverse reactions that happen to it, the medical risks to binding, to tucking, I believe it's called. All of these are very dangerous physically to our children. And much like in the struggle of trying to find your identity in this phase, you may have a notion that you want to be homosexual, and you may be experimenting on that, and that's part of this phase as well. The one thing that you have to be most concerned about and we have to think about is that If someone changes their mind for whatever reason and becomes a homosexual after their pubescent period, or decides not to be homosexual, either way, there's no harm. But if a child goes through this therapy, there is no turning back. There's absolutely no turning back. If you take the drugs, if you do the binding, if you do the surgeries, there's no returning. And children are not of sound mind to be able to make those decisions. And if a parent wants to make those decisions for those child, that's a family decision. Whether we agree or not, that's their choice. But that's my biggest concern, is that if a teacher or if a staff member encourages a student to take therapies, to do things, because we do have states neighboring us that will allow them to do that. If we have a student who feels the need, felt that they were pushed, or that staff gave them indication, we're at a liability if this child comes back to us in 4 or 5 years. Because the fact of the matter is that when these kids graduate, we're gone. We're done. We aren't there to support them anymore. And the only support they have is their family. And so that's why this needs to be kept with the family and out of the schools, because we do not have experts on this. And I don't think we'll have any experts on this. Trustee Howie?
That's why it's not being offered in this state right now. That's the main thing, unless the student is of age. The other thing I wanted to say is, I taught high school for 28 years, and I cannot even imagine encouraging a student toward anything. What I always did was listen to what they were worried about and trying to get them to think about it. And the next thing I would get them to try and do would be to tell their parents. But I didn't feel like I could tell their parent unless they wanted me to tell their parent, or unless they wanted to tell their parent. You might recall I had a student who knew that if he told his parents that he would be thrown out of his house. So I did not tell the parent. I did not encourage the young man in any way, but I did listen. And I cannot picture a teacher in this district that would ever push a kid one way or another. Pretty naive. Just my opinion.
Trustee Hopkins?
Yes, has the previous board or this board based, this might be a decision to the attorney, has it made decisions based on lawsuits or previous lawsuits or lawsuits around the country?
That's not an easy question. So what we do usually is we look at the set of facts and circumstances that we're in, then we evaluate those facts and circumstances, or the risk of those facts and circumstances in a given situation. But there are so many different variables there. So the variables include things like, are we in state court, are we in federal court, are we in an administrative proceeding or not in administrative proceedings? Does it involve people sued in their individual capacities? Does it involve people sued as the organization? There's so many variables there, but of course it does get filtered through what the law is and what the, basically what the law is and what the circumstances are. That's why I use the bathroom as an example, because we don't have really a clear rule here. There's just nobody's delineated a clear rule. They've set the bookends for it. The bookends are obvious, but nobody's delineated a clear rule, and I don't think we ultimately will have a clear rule until the United States Supreme Court tells us. Lots of analysis goes into that, lots and lots and lots, so.
Yes, well, Trustee Schmidt, or, okay. Trustee Welch? I saw her first.
Well, I do appreciate Trustee Smith sending us the information, proposing a draft policy. At this time, I don't think we have a problem that we need to address this. I would like this committee to put it on the back burner, because there are so many, I hate to use this term and tell you that I think we are wasting our time. We are not talking about meeting the academic needs and the curricular needs of our students. And so until, I do not see that there's a problem. We have a process to handle the things that are listed in here. So I would hope this committee would put it on the back burner and we would get to work on the things that we really need to get done in this district.
Trustee Schmidt and Trustee Hopkins. To Trustee Howie's comments, I hope that we don't have teachers that would push any direction. And if you're correct in that we don't, then putting that stipulation in there shouldn't be offensive to anybody, because nobody worries that if they won't overstep. So it shouldn't be an issue there. Secondly, if you listen to any of the legislative hearings regarding the Chloe's Law, and I can't remember the other one, but there was several doctors from around the state that talked about using the therapies and wanting that protection to do it. So yes, there are doctors that are in the state that are prescribing it in conjunction with the family's will and the child's will. So that is there. Are the surgeries happening here? No. You definitely have to leave the state for those. But we're a very transient society, so I don't consider that to be a problem for a family. That's really where they want to go. My concern is if a person feels the need to do this, then that's their decision. But I just think a child needs to be given time to make sure that they've gone through the full developmental phases and that they've come out of it, and if they still feel this need and they've gone through counseling, then that's their decision. And that's where I'm most concerned, is that we're letting children be children, and it is tough with a teenager. I got 4 of them. It's tough. So letting them go through their phases and letting them go through the difficulty and trying to help them can be some of the toughest things for a parent to have to do. And it can be heartbreaking. And I want to support those parents. But we can't be everything to everybody. And we oftentimes hear about how it's not just about academics, it's about the whole child. This falls under that whole child category. And so if we're going to adopt, which we have been spoken to about a lot, the whole child mentality in our academics, then we have to address this policy, because it is part of the whole child thought process that comes from above. Thank you, Trustee Hopkins. Oh, okay. Trustee Savelli.
Keeping what Trustee Walsh had in mind and looking at the clock and remembering the Latin phrase tempus fugit, and so must we, what would be the procedure at this point to suggest we move on to the next agenda? Would that have to be in the form of a motion?
Nope, if there's no more trustee comment, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you, Trustee Savelli. Thank you all the trustees for your input. Thank you, Trustee Schmidt. We are going to go ahead and move on to the proposed revisions to board policies 6232 and 6233, and this is brought forth by Trustee Schmidt also. These policies we went over last time. We read through them, we discussed them extensively. To those that were not here, the minutes don't quite give the discussion justice as to what we did. We had a great conversation about it. I will give you the follow-up that I wrote that hits the high points that we had in that meeting. And then I would like to ask the teacher that I invited, because we did discuss in the meeting minutes, it was mentioned that we were going to ask librarians and teachers to come and give their input on this policy. And I did invite a teacher who reviewed the policy when I wrote it, both of them, or put my changes into it, and he agreed to come and speak to us and give us his point of view. But briefly, my follow-up on it. I want to thank all the board members that attended the last board policy meeting. I spent the past month thinking over the points that each of you made about my suggested revisions. I wanted to address several of the points of contention in our discussion. The use of parent instead of patron, academic versus education, and leisurely reading and original sourcing. I would like to define and explain why I wanted to change the word patron to parent. Patron is defined as a person who gives financial support to an organization, cause, or activity. A parent is the person responsible for the child regarding the public education system.
The parent is the person financially responsible for the child, and then a financial supporter through taxes of the organization. In a traditional sense of the word, the parent is the direct consumer of the public school product. Ultimately, the parents are choosing to send their children to public school, and we should respect that they have a choice in how they educate their children. Academic versus education. Academic is academic of an institution or a course of study, placing a greater emphasis on reading and studying than on technical or practical work. Education is the theory and practice of teaching. These are the definitions that I'm thinking of when I am talking about academic versus education. They are very similar and can often be interchanged with one another. Academic is a more narrow term that identifies the specifics of our core subject matter. Leisurely reading. The main discussion centered around the idea of leisurely reading. What is leisurely reading? It is the art of engaging in self-selected reading for personal and social reasons. This definition allows for a wide swath of reading choices we as a publicly funded institution cannot possibly cover in its entirety. Since we are an academic institution, we should narrow our focus to those books that support what we are trying to teach. By providing literature that is supporting our academic subject matter, we are reinforcing the notion that good literature can be found in many different genres. Providing the level of difficulty that marketable literature does not provide will enhance our students' ability to comprehend, spell, and testing skills. My idea of promoting leisurely reading in these proposed policy changes are to introduce literature that is not readily available, strengthen the academic subject matter, and further an interest that might be sparked in the classroom. For example, if you're studying early American literature in your English class and you are assigned 2 to 3 books to read about the subject matter over the course of the term, most students would not go on their own to look for more books on early American literature. If a teacher brought the students to the library and introduced the section in the library that has books on this period of literature, students would be exposed to literature that is not readily available to them in other libraries. It would also reinforce the type of literature that the teacher has chosen to focus on in their classroom. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren will learn from entirely new interpretations because those doing this interpreting are products of their own time. The only way to understand the past is to understand the past completely is to one, study the primary sources yourself, consider all possible interpretations, and use your best judgment based on available research and resources to come to a conclusion. Know that because we aren't living in the past, there are some things we just won't know for sure. So original sourcing, considering all possible interpretations, and using the student's own individual best judgment are the only way to educate and foster critical thinking. This method should be supported in the classroom and the library for all 10 content areas. And so I asked our history teacher, Kelly Walsh.
We're gonna actually wait 1 second. We're gonna have some trustee discussion if that's okay, before we have him come up.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah. Thanks. Okay. So, does anybody else have anything to say, or like just? I'll go ahead and start again. I have read this thoroughly, and first and foremost, I feel like this policy is just looking at specific words that absolutely don't make a lot of sense to change. In terms of patron, we have homeless students, foster students, we have parents we have students who are foreign exchange students, kids who live with their grandmas and grandpas, aunts and uncles. How would you expect us to change that from patron to parent?
We put parent guardian.
Wow.
Some of the other things that are in here that kind of catch me off guard is enlightenment, and you have specified that you would like leisure reading to be very specific. So not a lot of fun things to read in a library.
They can be fun as long as the education can be fun. I think most teachers would agree. And I'm not saying that they can't have leisurely reading, but I do think that our libraries should be supporting the academic mission. And isn't it part of the academic mission is to want to encourage children to read history, historical books, to read great literature? Those are the types of things. An example of the leisurely reading that we're going over right now and be addressing at the next board meeting in May are the books that came before the Reconsideration Committee. Those books were written at a 3rd to 5th grade level. That's what the Lexia reading level is. But yet they're deemed for 9th to 10th grade students because of the content in it. That's my concern is, are we giving the children quality literature that is going to make their brains work harder? There was an English teacher that told a friend of mine whose son took an AP English class here in this district, and she said her son, who was an A student, struggled with taking the AP test, or taking the AP and ACT test, because he just couldn't read fast enough and get the answers out, which is a common problem. And the teacher told him, have him read the Wall Street Journal or something that is way above his level, because it makes your brain move and go faster, and then when you come back to take something at your level, you move through the test quicker. I think we should be encouraging that. As far as the resource part goes, we should always be teaching history and as much of the subject matter from original sourcing as possible, because it's up to the students to look at all of that and to go through that and make those determinations themselves and not take someone else's interpretation.
I'm gonna go to Trustee Sidelli, but I actually do find it, that you say that. It is very often common that we hear from people who bring problems forth, and it's not original sourcing. We have heard very common that there are things happening that nobody actually knows anything about. Does that make sense? So you're expecting us to have a library full of books, original sourcing, but sometimes we can't even get, people to come to us and talk to us of something, a firsthand experience. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I do, and I actually have 2 letters from teachers that agree with these policies that were afraid to come forward. They said I can mention and I can read their information, but please don't mention their names. So they're original sources. They are in the library currently teaching, or in the school district currently teaching, agree with these policies, and yet have concerns about coming forward. So yeah, I do agree with you. Original sourcing is very difficult. But as far as the academic mission goes in this school, having the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Democracy in America, Tocqueville, having those types of original sources, those aren't hard to get, and they're not hard to maintain, and they support all of our history teachings. William Bradford, his diaries on the first Thanksgiving and coming here, those are original sources. There's a lot of literature, good literature from original sources, slaves, the original settlers, early American, original speeches from historical figures. All of those are not hard to get. They're great sources to use and to have for teachers to use.
Trustee Sidelli?
A quick question, and again, in the interest of time, are we dealing at this point with code number 6232 or 6233? Or have we jumbled them together?
They're both on there together.
I would suggest that we deal with one at a time and go straight to 6232.
Okay.
That's all.
Did you have something you wanted to?
That's the shorter one of the 2.
Right, that is definitely the shorter one of the 2.
Okay.
Learning resources selection.
There are some interesting things in here. I am a great lover of critical thinking. It always bothered me when I would hear people say, schools need to teach critical thinking, and every time I taught a debate course, I had several weeks worth of critical thinking. So I like that, but not if something else is going to be eliminated. I like academic interest, but not at the expense of diversity of appeal. I think they both belong there. I love the idea of original and historical accounts, but not at the expense of points of view. I like intellectual, but I also like the word cognitive. So what I'm getting at is there's some very good ideas in here, but not at the expense of eliminating the wording that we already have.
Right, thank you. Are there any other comments trustees would like to make at this time about some of these? Trustee Myler. I looked away and I looked back, you have a baby.
Yes, I do.
And he is the cutest baby.
My youngest little boy, Bridger.
I'm dying, I'm like,
Whereas my
"Oh,
wife
baby."
used to star the show on the TVs, but I will not distract you from my
Did you
thoughts
have-
here.
yes.
So I did go through these one more time before coming here, and I just need to ask a clarifying question. So my favorite genre is epic fantasy. Some of my favorite authors include Brian McClellan and Brandon Sanderson. Under this policy revision, would those be allowed to be in the library?
yes, I'm not saying that you can't have leisurely reading or fantasy reading. I just think that we need to make sure that the majority of the focus of the library is in support of the subject matter that we're teaching. We do have to keep in mind that we are an academic institution, and so we should make sure that the majority of our library collection is supporting that. And we can have leisurely reading, but we also, all our students, and we pay fees for access to the state library website that connects you to all of the public libraries in the state. And so children can download those books on their school computer, and it doesn't cost us. So, I mean, other than our fees to that association that we're already paying. So it's not like we're not giving them access, we're just trying to consolidate our resources and making sure we're doing the best with that money, being the best stewards with that money. And ultimately, we have to support the teachers in what they're teaching in the subject matter and the 10 content areas first and foremost, and then we can add the other ones. So there's room for both, but we just have to make sure we're really focusing on those areas first and foremost.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Myler.
Do you not feel that we're already doing that?
No, I don't. And I've talked to several teachers, they don't take their kids to the library. My children have taken a history and an English class, and they were brought down to get the book, and then they left. So I don't think so, and most teachers don't take them there for research purposes. They show them all the websites to go to on their computers, so there's no going to the library and researching and looking at books and that type of thing. So, and looking at our catalogs, there's a lot more books of leisurely support than there are of academic support. So I think that we should look at that and address that more.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Jennings?
Trustee Alfie, trustees, I will not weigh in on the policy, as that is trustees' purview, not mine. But I do want to clarify and make sure that there is a point. Is Natrona County School District under policy has a decentralized budget, meaning that the dollars fall to the individual students. We'll talk more about that during the budget meeting. But currently, library materials would be under the purview of the principal, the teachers, and the librarians in the existing schools. So they are the ones that identify what books are purchased and identify what they get for the resources they have in libraries. So there's not a centralized library purchasing. There's no one in the district office that would be purchasing library books, but it truly would go back to the individual school librarians, the teachers in the building, and the principal, and they're allocating the dollars through their budget process, which is open inclusive, for them to work together to identify what books are in the library. So the teachers very much have a say along with the principals and librarians. Just for clarification on that topic, as far as the purchasing of material, it's not by district staff, it's not at the district level. Library books are truly at the school level.
Thank you. Trustee Sidelli?
Boy, I hope this is a quick question. Is this an action item for tonight's meeting?
No, it's not.
So at this point, we do not need to take action on this policy. Thank you.
No. Anybody else have any comments at this time? If not, we will go ahead and move on to our public comment section. This is something that is something, oh, I apologize. I'm so sorry. 6233, that is going to be the next policy we will go over. We will have Trustee Schmidt go over her reasoning and rationale as to why she has brought this one forward.
Before you do say that, before we go to the comment, I would like to invite the teacher up that came first and foremost, only because in our meeting, in our last meeting, we talked about inviting librarians, teachers, and stakeholders to give us their feedback, and I did so, and I would like to have him come up prior to. And that is stated in the minutes that we just voted on.
Come on.
So I think these two policies are pretty close, and I think what you have given us is pretty well going to fit into what this is also bringing forward. So we will go ahead and open public comment. So I am just going to say that we do not do this very often. I am happy to have this happen. Please make sure that your comments do stay within 3 minutes. We are trying
the teacher
to
that she invited doesn't get to be invited
via email, or
to
if you'd like
talk.
to come to our other meeting tonight and be able to speak. And please do keep it to these agenda items only. Thank you.
Huh.
Hello, my name is Kyle True. I'm the fourth generation NCHS graduate. I want to thank you all for taking the time to be here. I want to thank one of you who shall remain nameless for being a great Mustang football player, another of you who shall remain nameless for giving me a great year of school as a Crystal Dragon. You shall remain nameless. Thank you for your time. So I think we're living through a time, well, I'm going to make three statements. First of all, my daughter had to play basketball at NCHS against a male with long hair who presumably thought he was transitioning to female. This is a relevant issue. We're dealing with it now. If my daughter plays basketball again, I'd like her to have the safety and security of knowing that if she goes into the locker room, there are only females in that locker room. She has the freedom to maintain her modesty. Okay. Secondly, I'd like to say, we're living through a time of temporary societal absurdity. And this doesn't happen all the time. And so you're being asked to do something that's unusual. 150 years ago, there was a time of temporary societal absurdity when people in the south of this nation thought whites were better than blacks. We now look back at that time with justifiable contempt. There was a time in the 1920s in California when eugenics blossomed under the science of Darwinianism and all this evolutionary stuff, and we're going to direct evolution, make it better human. We look back on that time with justifiable contempt. There was a time in Nazi Germany, I'm going to go there, when a group of people thought that Jews were descended from pigs. We look back at that time with justifiable contempt. We're living through a time today when people are pretending that there's not, that we all know boys are boys and girls are girls. And people in the future will look back on us if we make policies that don't maintain that common sense, justifiable contempt. So whatever policies you enact, please maintain the reality that's been recognized forever, that there are boys, there are girls, there are men, there are women. It is well defined with chromosomes. The third thing I'd like to say is that gender dysphoria should engender our compassion and help. Similar to an anorexic saying, I'm overweight, this is terrible. We should not affirm the anorexic and say, yes, you are overweight. I hope you can lose weight better. Why are you eating so much? I would hope that a teacher who has a student come in and say, I don't know what gender I am, would encourage them into the truth and would not tell an anorexic, you bet, you go lose more weight. Or a bulimic, you better vomit again. So similarly, we should give these people care, not affirm them in dysphoria.
If you guys can please hold your applause while we get through people, thank you.
I'll applause when I want to. So
I can't, I don't have two hands.
Alright. What do you need my name? Brandon Schaefer.
Name and address, please.
Brandon Schaefer, I live 3500 East 8th Street, Cashel, Wyoming, 82609. I teach at Kelly Walsh and I teach history, and I think it's so important that we do teach where history came from. History's messy. I mean, we all know that. Great things have happened, crappy things have happened, or bad things have happened. But to just be like, oh, well, this is bad and I'm going to tell you about this, or I really like this, I'm going to tell you like this. It shouldn't be the way to go. We should teach kids what history is and where we've come from, right? We have a lot of great and noble philosophers. People say back then, I wouldn't teach just Hobbes, I wouldn't teach just Locke, I teach both of them. Talk about why does Locke like this idea of splitting up power, why does Hobbes think that there should be one person to rule the people because people are just inherently bad, so we need that one person to rule it, right? I wouldn't teach just Marx, but also teach Smith, right? Communism, capitalism. I think that's so important for kids to understand that and have a discussion, right? We've seen the world today. We can't have civil debate. Everybody wants, people want to be right, or it's this way or no way, right? In order to teach kids to listen to everybody, to have an opinion, to be okay with having that opinion. Somebody may disagree, which is great. That's a great way to teach in the classroom. And giving them documents from where we came, or where I teach European history, where they came in Europe, right? That's so important for students to get outside of here, regardless if they're going to go to college, they're going to go to trade school, They have to, we think. They have to be able to read something, oh, this is good, this isn't good, be able to explain to somebody, be able to voice their opinions. I mean, they're gonna be our voting citizens. They don't know what they're voting for and why. Articulate that, what's the point? So we need, I think, those kids need those documents. They need to be able to see where we've come. And that it's not always good. But that's okay. We can talk about the good, we can talk about the bad. But not pushing them one way, not saying this is better than this, giving the information and letting them decide what they like. My job as a teacher is never to tell them how to think, it's to teach them how to think, to teach them how to think about things. If they read something or see something on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever, right? Is that true, is it not? Go look at another source. If that's what we need our kids to do, and when we see it in today's world, that's not happening. Kids just, oh, this is true, so I'm gonna go. So I think having those documents, having a library that is centered on academics, that is about learning about the world and how we came to where we have is very important.
Thank you.
Dirk Andrews, 1612 Westridge Place. All right. First off, I just want to say that I'm speaking as an individual. Yes, I'm the president of the Teachers Association. I will own that. But as a member of the LGBTQ community, I'm very offended right now. I'm hurting. You called out a specific group and you're creating a policy around one group. At what point, and please don't hear me say I want this because I don't. I believe that every student should feel accepted at school. Every student should feel safe at school. At what point then do we start calling out athletes? That's an identity. Are we going to tell them that they can't wear a jersey to school? What's next? Policies have consequences. And I am so offended that we are calling out a specific group. It is 2023. As the person who got the first marriage license in Wyoming back in 2014, I will tell you, the comments that were shared were so much more positive than the world we're living in right now. Why we're going after a specific group just breaks my heart. I belong just as much as you. Second off, I want to share that if we as educators had any control over what students did at school, number one, they would do their homework. Number two, they'd take a shower and wear deodorant. And number three, we would like some coffee. If we had that type of control, those are things that would happen at school. They don't. Breaks my heart sitting here having to speak when we are still attacking a very marginalized group, a group that we already know has a higher suicide rate, trying to create policies when they're not the issue. They are not the issue. I've heard people talk about transgendered male being in the bathroom with the females. There are policies and things in place should that student do something. Title IX wouldn't protect them. But the kid that wants to go to the bathroom and just use it and get out, that's what it's for. I have never seen a student who identifies as transgender, and I'm not going to use the term gender dysphoria, as transgender, has ever gone into a bathroom to cause harm. They might try and claim it or do something else, but there are processes in place. So please, stop. We don't need this. We need to be a safe and welcoming place for all students, not just the ones we agree with.
Good evening, my name is Kathy Ide. I live at 3838 Garden Creek Road. I fully support the intent of the policy revisions that are being proposed here today. It is encouraging to see changes that hopefully will be adopted within the school district that focus on academics rather than liberal social ideology. Leftist assaults on the family unit and their attempts to turn our nation into something unrecognizable from 100 years ago have sadly been successful and have inflicted great damage upon our children. On its face, our society no longer seems to be based upon truth, but rather offers confusion and lies to our children, all at tremendous cost. Those costs are not only mental and emotional in nature, but have caused unspeakable physical harm to many children, harm that cannot be reversed. Of all virtues, especially during the perplexing years of puberty, the virtue of honesty is paramount. Confusion of biological sex must be met with truth, rather than going along with the latest and greatest progressive du jour. Our Declaration of Independence beautifully spoke of the laws of nature and of nature's God. It is a law of nature that every human's biological sex is determined at the moment of conception, not when they are 4 or 12 or 18 years old. If there were ever a time for candor, that time is now, no matter how painful it is for the receiving end. I urge you, the Natrona County School Board, to rise above the fraudulent transgender lie and instead be a leader standing on truth for parents and children in our community and country. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. I am just going to have a quick reminder. It's 5:51, so we have 9 minutes left. So if you'll continue to come on, we are going to go ahead and call the meeting at 6 p.m. Trustee Walsh?
Just a point of information, I believe. I think what we were looking for on this committee was a report from the librarians and teachers, how they felt on this. And I think that's important to have, because possibly does this get voted to move forward tonight?
It's about public time.
That's just a clarification from me.
Thank you. Trustee Hopkins, you just wanted to say also?
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that we would be able to hear the rest of
Hi, my name is Martin Goss. I live at 2959 Central Drive. I am a graduate of McKinley Elementary, Dean Morgan Junior High, and Natrona County High School. I am a product of this district. I'm damn proud of it. However, I'm taking all of my kids and all of my grandkids out of this district. I cannot tolerate my daughter going into a locker room for her gym class and seeing a naked boy in that class. That's wrong. It happens in a high school in this district today.
Quit shaking your head.
Or she wouldn't have told me that. I will not call my daughter a liar. She's
You'll let him
too
finish
smart.
and then you can have a comment, Trustee Hopkins.
I'm just not gonna tolerate it anymore. I believe in kids. I don't care what gender they've been told they are. I don't care any of that. I believe in kids. One of the best teachers in the world was in this district. His name was Leo Sanchez. And he taught all of us how to think. That's what we need to be doing. We don't need to be perverting the kids. We don't need to be polluting their brains. They need to be kids. All this excess junk, and I'm sorry I keep wanting to slip into Army language, needs to quit, guys. We're not looking out for their welfare. That's our job. We're grown-ups. We are supposed to take care of their education, their health, and their welfare. We're not doing it. It's gotta quit. 30 years I spent, to include about 5 pounds of meat, protecting these kids. And we're not doing a good job of it now. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Hopkins?
Sir? Sir, can you please go ahead and sit down? I just have a couple more questions.
Sure.
Oh,
Could you expand on
Trustee
what
Hopkins.
happened to your daughter?
We're not gonna ask questions right now during this public comment period. We're gonna let our commentators speak, okay?
I want the rest of them to have a chance.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you.
This is him.
Archie Petrie, 136 South Walcott. So a couple of things, because I could probably spend a whole amount of time agreeing and disagreeing with a huge swath of the information that was presented. Couple of things. No, I graduated from the University of Wyoming in 2011, and we were actively using the word LGBT. The T stands for trans. So no, it's not a post-2015. That might be when your news cycle started paying attention to it. But that's not how long trans rights have been. And in fact, going back to the other gentleman, you're right, the 1920s was a horrible time when the Germans started, in the 1920s and 30s, when the Germans started to round up and started doing legislation and policy to dehumanize the Jews, as well as trans people and gays. So when you come and present policies that are designed to dehumanize and segregate that same group, I have this weird policy that if I'm at a table and the person next to me says, the Nazis really didn't do that all wrong, my brain goes, maybe I shouldn't sit at this table anymore. And some of you might need to have that conversation. Now, I have before, and I will offer again, that as a licensed counselor, and as a licensed school counselor, and as a former counselor for the school district, my free time to help draft these policies, more than willing to help with that. Because based off of the information that's been presented tonight, obviously a lot of information is not understood. Yes, gender dysphoria is a diagnosis. So is ADHD, so is anxiety, so is depression, so is religious fervor if it's in a clinical setting. But the thing I'm most concerned about in all of this policy is the concept that the same group of people who were irate that the school district would take away parents' rights to decide whether their children could wear masks or not, now want teachers to now inform on parents. Quick news bite. If your kid is going to school and is identifying as female at school but not at home, the problem is not your kid. If you don't know about it, the problem is you. The reason you don't know about it is because your children are scared of you. And now you're wanting to pass a policy that says teachers are going to call the parent and say, oh, by the way, guess what Jimmy just said? That doesn't feel very democratic or American.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Pyatt.
Good evening.
And you can
Jeanette
quote me.
Ward, 1600 East 26th Street. Since legal counsel seems to be unaware, the whole point of Title IX was to prevent discrimination against girls, to give them their own sports. To suggest otherwise is willfully ignorant. Furthermore, to compare willful volitional behavior with the color of one's skin, as if it were the same as the civil rights battles of our past, belittles people of color. We were told by leadership in the Wyoming legislature that, quote, this isn't happening in Wyoming. As the lawsuit in Rock Springs indicates, this is happening here. I also have at least 2 first-hand accounts of this issue happening in this district, one of which you just heard. And there is a board member who just admitted she has personal experience with this. The board refuses to address this issue will come to your door. As the Wyoming State Representative for House District 57, I was proud to vote for SF 133, Student Eligibility in Interscholastic Sports, which became Enrolled Act 92, and further is now in Chapter 191 of Session Laws of Wyoming 2023. It is effective July 1st, 2023. This law prohibits grades 7 through 12 boys from competing on girls' sports teams. I suggest the board figure out how it is going to comply, since as of July, this will be the law of the land in Wyoming.
I want to again thank everybody for coming out tonight and being here for board policy. There is a lot of discussion on the table and a lot of things happening, and again, it's really important that we have the community's input and that you guys are here and talking with us. Thank you to, again, all the trustees for coming. We will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.